on satellite, on Freeview, on cable, on radio, on mobile, on the web and around the world. This is First at 9 on Other Derana 24/7.
Tonight, preamble to the budget. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe presents the pre-budget economic policy statement.
The local government elections will not be held in January.
It need not be postponed. In fact, I spoke to the Election Commission.
Not an error. Venerable Madhagama Dhammananda Thera insists there is nothing wrong with using pictures of chief prelates. Importance of the private sector. The US ambassador says the private sector is where the solution to youth unemployment is.
It is the private sector that is the engine of job creation and job growth almost anywhere in the world.
Hurdle cleared. US Senate approves budget blueprint paving way to pursue a tax cut package. And in sports, hanging in the balance, Pakistan chasing 175 to win the 4th one-day international against Sri Lanka. Good evening to all our viewers across Sri Lanka and around the world, and thank you for being here with us tonight. I'm Mahesh Johnny. Our First at 9 coverage begins tonight in Parliament. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe says a new development bank to provide development finance will be established with import and export facilities. He expressed these views presenting the pre-budget economic policy statement in Parliament today. Meanwhile, the issue of delayed elections was also debated in today's parliamentary session.
We have to pay a sum of over 3,040 billion rupees in the years of 2018 and 2019. This is the huge debt burden we have. To overcome this never-before-seen debt burden, the government has commenced a wise debt management method. Within the last 3 months, the taxes of essential goods were reduced. We request local retail and wholesale traders to give the benefit of the tax reductions to the consumers. We hope to generate 1 million jobs. We aim to increase the annual foreign direct investments to $5 billion per year. Measures will be taken to establish a national centre to provide trade facilities and a new development bank to provide development finance with import and export facilities. The Minister of Finance will explain it in the budget. Public transport for women should be improved to enable them to go to work with ease. We will introduce a light rail system towards this end. We request all of you to join this challenging journey which uplifts our motherland. The Minister of Local Governments has not yet issued the gazette needed for the elections to be held, which prevents elections being held in January.
To
correct by way of a resolution.
No, there is a change in that.
How can you change? We all agreed with you that the resolution can move in a day, and that is settled.
The local government ministry has consulted the AG, and AG has said that the amendment must necessarily come.
Which means that the local government elections will not be held in January.
It need not be postponed. In fact, I spoke to the Election Commission whether we can get the amendment and how long it will take. The Minister is presenting the amendment to Cabinet next week.
When he presents, he has to present, get approval, come to Parliament. When it comes to Parliament, minimum of 1 month's delay. That means nomination cannot be gazetted.
One of the issues that have been discussed is whether you can gazette it and get the amendment to catch up on it. That's something that we have to discuss.
Now, we can come to an agreement. The thing is, it takes time, Honorable Prime Minister. That period delays the election by another 2 months. This is the issue. By resolution, that correction can be made by Parliament. So, if that is done, there won't be any delay.
But the Minister is not agreeable to that, Honorable Prime Minister.
Prime Minister is agreeable. What is
Minister
the
not agreeable. He said he has advice from the AG.
No, we had agreed. How can the Minister say that I'm not agreeable? He's only trying to delay the election.
I was not here when you all discuss all this, and also what we do with Ambagamua and Kalmune. We will try to expedite it. That's the best thing. You want it?
How can we expedite? Constitutionally, any citizen can challenge. We can agree, but a citizen can challenge.
By resolution, I have no problem with it. Since he said we have to ask the AG, AG had gone to Bahamas. He's returning on Sunday.
I hope he doesn't end up in Cuba.
He won't end up in Cuba.
Now, leader of the JVP, Anrukumar Dissanayake, alleges that ruling the country while selling national resources has become a policy of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. He made the remark addressing a rally in Puttalam.
Ranil
Wickremesinghe formed a government promising to fill the public's pockets. He didn't do so. The economy has collapsed. We're deep in debt. We have refused loans, and when we request them, what do they say? We'll pay you if you give us the Hambantota port. Even that payment is spent in 2 months. I heard the central bank saying they haven't received a cent. Once the money from Hambantota is finished, what's next? They sell the Mattala airport and run for a short term from that money. After that, they sell the Colombo port's eastern terminal, the Kalpitia sands and the mineral sands of Pulmude. This is what happens when the country is forced to go begging.
Meanwhile, Politburo member of the Frontline Socialist Party, Kumar Gunaratnam, had this to say on the JVP.
They level stern statements at Ranil Wickremesinghe, hoping for a rebuke. But Ranil says nothing. Why? They prefer the JVP this way. They want the JVP to be tame. Remember how the JVP voted for the Provincial Council Elections Amendment Bill? For the past 6 months, JVP has either been voting for bills in Parliament or have been absent from the House at the time. They didn't oppose them. The radical leftists have been tamed.
President Maithripala Sirisena warns that all the citizens of the country must be aware of attempts by some fractions to mislead the society regarding a new constitution which has not even been drafted yet. He made the remark while addressing the Deepavali festival organised by the Presidential Secretariat at the President's House in Colombo yesterday.
The Deepavali festival was marked at the President's House in Colombo yesterday under the patronage of President Maithripala Sirisena in a ceremony that included many Hindu cultural performances.
අපි ආණ්ඩුක්‍රම ව්‍යවස්ථාවක් සම්බන්ධයෙන් කටයුතු කිරීමේදී
While we are working on a new constitution and trying to build peace, fraternity and coexistence within the country, some people are spreading misinformation in society in a deplorable manner. Some extremist factions are giving wrong information to the Mahasangha as well as other clergy, thereby misleading them. The LTTE was born as a result of the failure to solve the country's problems at the right time in the right way with timely decisions. We must understand this. We must look at this with wisdom and understanding into how we can build a wholesome, united society with trust among people so that there will never be another war. I believe we need to understand this issue with a degree of maturity.
පරිණතභාවයෙන් තේරුම් ගැනීම ඉතාමත් අත්‍යවශ්‍යයි කියන එකයි මා විශ්වාස කරන්නේ.
The registrar of the Asgiri chapter, Dr. Venerable Madhugama Dhammanandathera, states that there is no fault in newspapers publishing pictures of the chief prelates when reporting the decision taken by the working committee of the Malwathu and Asgiri chapters. The two working committees met at the Temple of the Sacred Tooth Relic in Kandy recently and noted that a new constitution is unnecessary. With the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe questioning the use of pictures of the chief prelates, Registrar of the Asgiri chapter, Dr. Venerable Madhugama Dhammanandathera, justified the use of the images of the chief prelates in reporting the story yesterday at a seminar organised by the Public State Council in Colombo.
This is a means to gain privileges and ministerial positions. The chief prelate of the Malwathu chapter is abroad for a few days. The working committees of Asgiri and Malwathu chapters met with the knowledge of the chief prelate of Malwathu chapter. I say responsibly that this is the opinion of the chief prelates of both Asgiri and Malwathu chapters. As the leaders of the two chapters, there is no fault in their picture being published in the newspaper. We can now see that politicians are staging a drama, saying that the chief prelates are irrelevant to this matter. We will never allow the proposed new constitution to be brought. During the election, people who were around Mahinda Rajapaksa got votes from us by putting forth his face. We kindly remind those people, including Susil Premajayantha, not to let this crime happen. If not, they will lose the right to engage in politics in this country.
Meanwhile, the decision allegedly taken by the Malwatha and Askari chapters to reject the constitution making process was criticized by several civil activists today. These views were expressed at a media briefing organized by the National Movement for a New Constitution held in Colombo.
Two of the second-line Anunayaka Theras of the Malwatha and Askari chapters made a statement recently. The statement went out to society as the stance of the two chapters. The chief prelate of the Malwatha chapter is not even in the country. Were they permitted to make this statement while he is not in the country? The Anunayaka Thera who made the statement stated the next night that this is his personal stance. Therefore, it is clear that the view spread in the country is partially wrong. The responsibility of correcting the stance lies with media as well as other theras. Anyone can say a constitution is not needed, but it doesn't have to be accepted. What is unfortunate is that the chief prelates misused a civil power they possessed for a political purpose. This is fraud. It is fraud if done by a layman, but if committed by clergy, it is sinful fraud.
Inter-University Students' Federation and the Government Medical Officers Association says that they will not agree to any final solution other than the abolishment of CITEM. They made these remarks at a media briefing held in Colombo today.
President Maithripala Sirisena yesterday said that the government's final decision on CITEM will be announced next week. When questioned on the president's remarks, Secretary of the GMOA, Dr. Aludge had this to say.
Firstly, the solution should arrive for us to be satisfied. There were many solutions over the recent past. At one point, Rajitha Senaratne and Lakshman Kiriyala said that a resolution was arrived at on the 31st of January. They said that a judgment is made and there is nothing that can be done beyond it. It is the first time that the head of state gave any indication pertaining to a final decision on CITEM. We hope that the decision made will be acceptable as a nation. We expect the final decision to be the abolishment of CITEM. We expect to make a request from the President within the day to intervene in this matter and hold discussions with the relevant parties based on the requests made by the chief prelates. We decide whether the final decision will be the end of this struggle or not. The government should completely vest CITEM in the public. They cannot make Neville Fernando and the public happy at the same time.
Minister of Skills Development and Vocational Training Chandima Virakode states that the solution for youth unemployment lies with the private sector. He added that the government must work hand in hand with the private sector to develop skills that match industry requirement. The minister made these remarks yesterday addressing the launch of a joint US-Sri Lankan vocational support initiative.
The governments of Sri Lanka and the United States launched the U-Lead initiative yesterday under the patronage of US Ambassador to Sri Lanka Atul Keshap and Minister of Skills Development and Vocational Training Chandima Virakode. U-Lead is a 1.8 billion rupee program funded by the United States Agency for International Development to support youth employability, vocational skills development and entrepreneurship.
It's amazing to behold what young folks in this country can achieve, what their vision is of the future of this country. And we are committed to giving our full support as a government and a people to the achievement of the dreams and vision of the people of Sri Lanka. We are fully invested in the success of the Sri Lankan people. What gives me hope is that Sri Lanka is a growing economy. It is the private sector that is the engine of job creation and job growth almost anywhere in the world. And that it is in the areas where your economy has comparative advantage, like tourism, construction, maritime services, where the private sector will truly lead the growth of job creation and provide opportunity to young people.
Our topmost priority, I believe, should be to train to match the industry requirement, nationally and internationally. We have started that process. But for that, interaction, constant contribution and sailing together with the private sector is a must. We have a huge percentage of untapped human resource that has a huge potential. We can train our Sri Lankans to match the requirement outside. As the government, we believe the solution lies with the private sector. The solution lies with the industry ministry is there with its fullest commitment to see that this becomes a success. We can all get together and see within 4 years that a significant change is brought about in employability of Sri Lankan youth, and at the same time that we have brought in a match between the employer and the employee.
Now here's a look at other stories making news across Sri Lanka.
The National Council for Road Safety states that during the past 9 months, 24 people have been killed taking selfies while travelling by train and walking along railway tracks. The Railway Department has taken steps to install reflective boards along railway tracks in order to minimise railway accidents. The first program in this regard was held at the Narahinpita railway station this morning under the patronage of Minister of Transport and Civil Aviation Nimal Siripal de Silva. An artillery shell used by the LTTE was found at the Hulannuge Vidyalaya in Ampara by students who had been cultivating the school garden. The artillery shell was handed over to the Police Special Task Force for disposal. Severe traffic congestion was experienced due to urgent repairs after a water pipeline burst near the Kadawatha police station this morning. Water supply to several areas and roads in and around Kadawatha was disrupted for 12 hours from 9:30 am today due to the damaged pipeline. 5 persons were arrested by Polonnaruwa police while excavating for historical artifacts in Kaltabarava, Polonnaruwa. Police stated that a public health inspector attached to a medical office in Polonnaruwa and a retired principal were among the arrested.
Well, when Great Britain wanted to pull out of the European Union, it was a shock to all. Now, however, with time, people are still unsure as to what implications it may bring. First at 9 looked into the very thing that it impacts on Sri Lanka.
It all started like this. The leader of the UKIP, Nigel Farage, campaigned for 20 years to take the UK out of the European Union with the slogan, "I want my country back." With the promise of pumping £350 million to the National Health Service on a weekly basis, a week's money allocated for the EU, he managed to sway the opinion within the United Kingdom and got what he wanted. The campaign also pitched Brexit as a measure to curb immigration. With the EU demanding billions of euros from Britain for the pullout, the true implications of Brexit are still unclear. With that being the case, how does its effects trickle down to Sri Lanka, with UK being a top market for Sri Lankan exports?
The question of Brexit and its impact on Sri Lanka, or indeed on any other part of the world, of course is still quite unclear insofar as we don't know what type of Brexit there would be. Would it be a hard Brexit in terms of a clean and complete breakaway of Britain from the European Union, or is it going to be a softer one in which terms will be negotiated by which certain benefits will still be retained? There is the possibility, of course, that the pound is going to be hit again. Now that, no doubt, may well have a knock-on effect on tourism. For Sri Lanka, that, of course, would have an impact. In addition to that, we have just secured GSP+. Britain is part of the European Union at this point. Once Brexit happens, we will have to enter into trade agreements with Britain in order to get those kinds of concessions and favourable trading arrangements that we may well have enjoyed in the past as part of a wider package of being part of the European Union.
Although Brexit promotes curbing immigration, there are some immigrants who are in support of the pullout.
Personally, I didn't vote for Brexit. As an Australian living in London, I felt that I wasn't informed enough about the Brexit vote. Had I voted, though, I would have actually voted for Brexit. I think Brexit is going to be, in the long run, a very good thing for the UK. I think that the economy will pick up.
What about the country's younger generations? What do they think of Brexit? When we spoke to them, it soon became apparent that the idea of travel and freedom to work anywhere in Europe is what they are most concerned about.
Well, it's physically separating us from the rest of Europe, which isn't great, but it's dividing people who voted leave and remain within the country, and so it's just sort of separating everyone. but I think we should be trying to stick together at uncertain times.
A lot of people we know want to go to Amsterdam. Travelling to other European countries is going to be visas and same with jobs as well.
It is no secret that one of the major complaints of being part of the EU is the accumulation of wealth in London and that wealth not being dispersed to outer regions. Another schoolteacher who works in London, this Brexiter believes it is not as complicated as it is made out to be.
Yeah, I'm a different generation to our students who are quite pessimistic about Brexit. They often see it as a restriction from being able to go and travel, work, probably abroad. But having sort of had experience of what happened to the UK before they were in the EU, there were no restrictions really. You just had to have a multi sort of agreement with different countries about visas. Emerging economies in the world are actually from China, India, rather than sort of Europe. So Europe is actually, and the US is taking a less of world trade. So actually coming out of Europe and being able to do trade deals independently with countries such as India, Sri Lanka, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the US, and not having to go through the European sort of red tape may in the long term be very beneficial for us, I think. I think tourists will still come from the UK whether we're in Europe or whether we're not. It may actually be easier for tourists from the UK to come to Sri Lanka because we won't necessarily have to have a visa. There may be agreement between Sri Lankan government and the UK government, which means that we may not need the same visa as Europeans.
Over the last 2 decades in particular, a certain trend where Sri Lankan youth leaving our shores for the UK for higher education has been seen. Not just them, but Sri Lankans also leave for the UK in search of greener pastures. When we spoke to companies who handle visas, they said under anonymity that number of Sri Lankans seeking visas to the United Kingdom have dropped. When asked why, they said with Brexit, people visiting the UK know they cannot sneak into other countries, let it be for leisure or to have a fresh start. So is seeking passage to the UK still viable?
In terms of Sri Lankans going to the United Kingdom, whether it be for educational purposes or indeed whether it be in terms of migration, migrating to Britain is not all that easy. Irrespective of Brexit, that is probably going to be the case as long as governments within Britain take a particular view with regard to immigration, as long as they feel that they have to placate a right-wing political opinion within their own countries that are against migration and against foreigners, internationals, particularly from the global south, coming into their country.
You are watching Sri Lanka's #1 news channel, Derana 24/7.
Welcome back, everyone. In the third and final installment today, we conclude Derana's exclusive tour of Shangri-La Colombo at the heart of the house. What is the future of Sri Lanka's tourism, and do we have the necessary skill sets to cater to the luxury market in the country? Vice President and General Manager of Shangri-La Colombo, Timothy Wright, gives his insight into the industry and presents challenges that needs to be overcome for the sustainability of tourism in Sri Lanka. First at 9's Katharina Chang brings us this report tonight.
Now, back of the house is one of the most overlooked places. I mean, we always see the front of the house, but we do not basically see the operation that goes behind it, the hard work. So if you could talk about staff motivation at Shangri-La per se.
Well, firstly, we don't call it the back of the house, we call it the heart of the house, because that's really where the heart of all our operations start. But certainly making sure that we're looking after our people, give them good working conditions, make sure they're fed properly, and we've gone to great lengths to make sure that the food we provide is really of the top quality, something that they and all of us eat together. So we're getting this sense of family and connection at those important times like meal times. But I think keeping people motivated is not just about paying them well, not just about making sure that the environment is good and that we feed them well. It's also about giving them development opportunities, training and development.
So Tim, like you said, this is the heart of the house.
Yes.
And I must say the employees are very vibrant, very happy. What is the philosophy when it comes to staff having the correct attitude, if I may ask, for Shangri-La?
Well, I think during our recruitment process, we test their attitude. In our first recruitment exercise, we had some games to establish whether they had the teamwork. We took selfies with each other. We gave them musical instruments. So we were looking at those that felt naturally inclined to entertain, to have fun, and it really helped bring out their personalities.
Now, in terms of Shangri-La's philosophy, it's of course quality.
Yes.
And I am sure it's no secret that the hospitality industry in Sri Lanka is, I believe, faced with a lack of staff joining hotel industries in Sri Lanka, particularly in the 5-star caliber. Are those some of the challenges that you all are faced with as well?
Yeah, I think we're all faced with this lack of talent. I think one of the biggest or the most noticeable areas is the lack of women working in the industry. In most of our hotels, it's common to have more than 50% of our colleagues would be female colleagues. In Sri Lanka, it's been a real struggle to get more than 20–25%. So I think if we can somehow encourage the female workforce to join the industry, that it is a rewarding, that it is an exciting industry to work in, then I think that will alleviate some of those challenges.
So where do you see the future of the Sri Lankan tourism going forward?
I think it's going to be a very bright future. I think if the facilities and products that are available improve, I think if owners reinvest and develop their products further, I think that raises the standard of facilities that visitors will experience. And if that standard improves, then obviously word of mouth and postings on social media will improve, and that can only be more demand for Sri Lanka. So I think there's a very strong future. We'll need to work together, the private sector, the public sector, and we'll really need to work on marketing the beauty of this island to those people who haven't visited. But I think a bright future.
In international business, Australia's almost 100-year-old automotive industry ended today as manufacturer GM Holden Limited closed its plant in South Australia to move manufacturing to cheaper locations. The closure comes a year after Toyota and Ford similarly moved out, eliminating thousands of manufacturing jobs. Trade unions say nearly 2,500 newly unemployed workers will need government help finding work. Rising discretionary income and record low interest rates have encouraged consumers to buy new cars, but may turn against the larger passenger cars for which GM Holden is known. To Sri Lankan markets now, Sri Lankan shares snapped a 3-session decline to end slightly firmer today as investors picked up beverage shares in thin volume. The Colombo Stock Index finished 0.26% higher at 6,572, edging up from its lowest close since October 10th, hit in the previous session. Now for a wrap-up of how the markets performed this week, here is Raghuram Ramkrishnan from NDB Securities.
During this week, ASPA dropped 0.9% after recording weekly gains for 5 consecutive weeks. Meanwhile, S&P SL20 dropped 2.2% for the week. These losses were mainly due to the price losses which were seen in blue chip counters such as Hatton National Bank, Commercial Bank and Ceylon Co stores. The average daily turnover was down from last week to 982 million rupees. Banks, finance and insurance sector recorded the highest sector turnover during the week.
You are watching Sri Lanka's premier news channel, Other Derana 24/7.
On to international news now. President Donald Trump's drive to reform the U.S. tax code cleared a critical hurdle yesterday when the Senate approved a budget blueprint for 2018 fiscal year that will pave the way for Republicans to pursue a tax cut package without Democratic support.
The Republican-controlled Senate approved a multi-trillion-dollar budget by 51 votes to 49.
Tonight we completed the first step toward replacing our broken tax code by passing a comprehensive, fiscally responsible budget that will help put the federal government on a path to balance.
But Democrats are likely to oppose the Trump administration's tax plan, which promises to deliver up to $6 trillion in tax cuts to businesses and individuals.
Mr. President, this is not a bad budget bill. It is a horrific budget bill, an extremely cruel bill, and the most unfair budget ever presented in the modern history of our country. This is a budget that poll after poll shows the American people do not want.
Meanwhile, former President Barack Obama voiced concern about the current political climate in the U.S.
Instead of our politics reflecting our values, we've got politics infecting our communities. Instead of looking for ways to work together and get things done in a practical way, we've got folks who are deliberately trying to make folks angry, to demonize people who have different ideas, to get the base all riled up because it provides a short-term tactical advantage.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has reportedly created his own political ideology in a step towards enticing the position at the top of the Communist Party. Top officials have made multiple mention of Xi Jinping thought at the Communist Party Congress, which is underway in Beijing.
The Communist Party is widely expected to rewrite its constitution to enshrine Xi's ideology before Congress ends next week, elevating Xi to the level of leaders such as Mao Zedong. International media says it would signal Xi's enormous authority within the party and make it virtually impossible for others to challenge him.
Well, according to research from a new landmark study by a world's leading medical journal, pollution kills at least 9 million people every year. In 2015, almost 1 in 6 deaths were found related to pollution in some form.
The research in the Lancet Medical Journal found that the overwhelming majority of pollution-related casualties, around 92%, were found in poor or middle-income nations. And in countries looking to industrialize rapidly such as China, India and Pakistan, pollution was connected to as many as a quarter of all deaths. Air pollution had the biggest impact, accounting for 2/3 of deaths from pollution. The next largest risk factor, water pollution, accounted for 1.8 million deaths, while pollution in the workplace was linked to 800,000 deaths globally. According to the report, Brunei and Sweden had the lowest number of pollution-related deaths.
You are watching Sri Lanka's trusted news brand, Other Derana 24/7.
Well, on to cricket now. Sri Lanka is running the risk of recording their 11th consecutive defeat in one-day internationals, with the 4th match with Pakistan currently underway, placed rather precariously. Now, Sri Lanka only managed to get 173 runs in 43.4 overs in the match played in Sharjah in their chase. Pakistan are currently 119 for the loss of 3 wickets.
Winning the toss, Sri Lanka opted to bat first. Sri Lanka's top 5 batsmen were toppled for just 91 runs, with skipper Upul Taranga being the first to fall as he was bowled for a duck by Usman Khan. Dikwella was caught by Fakhar Zaman as he fell for 22. Chandimal fell for 16 with a suicidal run-out, depicting an utmost lack of communication.
Both batsmen at the one end. Chandimal goes.
Lahiru Thirimana was the only player to score a half-century, while many players were dismissed for single figures. Promising Pakistan bowler Hassan Ali picked up 3 wickets for 37, while Shadab Khan and Imad Wasim picked up 2 wickets each.
With a struggling 173.
Well, Russian President Vladimir Putin yesterday said the International Olympic Committee was being pressured by the United States to prevent Russia from taking part in the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics.
President Putin made this remark in a backdrop where Russia has been under intense scrutiny from global sports bodies since a 2015 report commissioned by the World Anti-Doping Agency found evidence of state-sponsored doping in Russian athletics.
We have seen that the IOC is under strong pressure. We don't make any claims against the IOC. There are really efficient people there. But they are dependent on advertisements, on TV channels, on sponsors, etc. So there are two options. Either to force Russia to take part on the neutral flag or to bar it from participating in the Olympics. Both options are humiliating for the country.
You are watching Sri Lanka's award-winning news channel, Derana 24/7.
Well, let's get the latest on the weather. For that, let's cross over to Sadhani Upeka at the Derana Weather Centre.
Good evening and welcome to the Weather Centre. To start off with, tomorrow's temperatures are expected to range between 21 and 33 degrees Celsius. We can expect a low pressure zone to develop over most parts of the island during the day. Showers or thunder showers can be expected over Jaffna, Mannar, Anuradhapura, Putlam and Batticaloa, and the same is true for most of the western and southern provinces as well as Kandy. That's it from the Weather Centre tonight. Up next is your city by city forecast.
So it's Friday, and before we wrap things up for this week, let's share a good story with you. Tonight's story comes to us from India. India is home to over 50% of the world's leprosy-affected population, and patients often don't have easy access to treatment. However, Hanumant Devnur, a three-wheel driver in Karnataka, has dedicated his income as well as for his time for leprosy patients who all come from the poorer section of the society. Devnur attends to his patients at his dispensary, which he founded with his own money in 2002 after repeated pleas to authorities that bore no fruits. His motivation to serve leprosy patients stems from the fact that his mother is also a sufferer of the disease, which leaves patients shunned by society, often to wait in the streets until good Samaritans like Devnur give them a helping hand. And that is a part of your world tonight right here on Derana 24/7. We appreciate you spending part of your evening with us tonight here on First at 9. I'm Mahesh Johnny. We'll return tomorrow at the same time. Until then, enjoy the weekend and have a good night.